Şimdi bence günün en ilginç sunumlarından birisi 30 günde SaaS startup'ı nasıl kurulur? Sam will be here for us. It will be an interesting presentation, I think, and I am wondering what's gonna tell about, because I built three startup, and none of them finished in 30 days. So let's hear Sam.
Hi everyone. Today I'm going to take you on a journey of how I built a profitable SaaS business with AI in 30 days, and what you can learn and how you can try and do this yourself. Now, I am going to say that the aim of this for me wasn't to build the next Facebook or the next Uber. It wasn't to earn $1 million. It was to build some small products that make a bit of passive income every month so that I can live the life I want to live. This is going to go into some technical detail, but we're also going to look at how you can focus on building a product and a business that is profitable. So I also love serverless for this, and now we're going to talk about the fact that I've been working with serverless for about 6 years, and I've been started as a YouTube channel teaching people how to become serverless developers on complete coding. This accidentally became a consultancy, and I've spent the last 4 years helping startups basically leverage the advantages that serverless offers. Beyond consulting, I've always had that itch for entrepreneurship, and I've managed to rack up quite a nice list of failed startups. They always start the same way. I think of a really cool idea, and I think it's going to be an amazing product. I spend evenings and weekends for about 6 months slaving away. Eventually, I think I've got all the features, and I think it is an amazing product. I get ready to launch, and then nothing. Sometimes I get a couple of free users, but I've never managed to get to the point where someone is willing to actually pay money to use my product. All of that time invested is incredibly frustrating. So I decided the next time I was going to do something different. If you've heard of Peter Levels, he did 12 startups in 12 months, where he gave himself 30 days to try and test a startup idea, and if it didn't earn money in 30 days, he'd move on to the next one. I still have consulting clients and a YouTube channel to run, so I modified this slightly to be just building a startup in 30 days. But the important part was keeping that 30-day limit. If I couldn't get paying users in that 30 days, the idea wasn't actually that good, and I'd move on. Luckily, my first ever 30-day challenge went about as well as I could have imagined. So this is the actual trajectory of the number of users in the 30 days, and I got over 300 users, generating $140 of passive income, and it continued to grow after that. There were 2 things that I think really helped launch this product in the way that it did, but also some things that I learned and would do differently in the future. So to launch my product in 30 days and get it profitable, I had 3 main challenges to overcome. The first is keeping it simple enough. It's so easy as techies to try and overcomplicate a solution, try and solve a problem that you might have in 2 years' time. Second is trying to find a problem that is painful enough that people want to actually pay money for you to solve it for them. If you don't, you get lots of free users, but no one actually pays you. And finally, I'm not a marketer. I'm a software developer. So trying to get the word out about my products was something I knew I had to overcome. So this idea that I came up with is a LinkedIn tool, and I found it actually by accident. I was scrolling through LinkedIn, and one of my favorite creators, Luke, said, here's some tips for growing your account. And he said, just engage, comment on as many different posts as you can, and that will help grow your account. I was like, oh, great. But why isn't everybody just doing that then, if it's so easy? Then I found this next post. If you see at the bottom, he spends 1.5 to 2 hours every single day just commenting on LinkedIn. I run consultancy and a YouTube channel, so I don't have time to spend that much of my day just writing comments. Around the same time, I'd been messing around with ChatGPT. Everyone knows it now, but at the time, it wasn't as well known. But I knew that it was powerful. I knew from demonstrations that it could generate some really interesting responses. Around the same time, like prompt engineering was starting to become like a really interesting topic, and people were finding ways to really improve and like curate the response they were getting from ChatGPT. So with all of this, I decided to test it out. I scrolled through LinkedIn and found a kind of post I would normally comment on. So instead of commenting it on myself, I decided to copy it into ChatGPT with this super simple prompt of, act as a software engineer, write me an engaging comment for this LinkedIn post. And as you see at the bottom, what you get back is quite long and quite wordy, but actually, if you look at the content of it, it's pretty good. It needs some work, but it proved my point. An interesting comment can be generated by ChatGPT. So, next, what do I do? Now, this is the point where normally I would just jump straight into the code. I would spend months coming up with all of the different ways that I could generate comments, and then try and launch it, hoping it would land. This time, it was different. I was going to do some validation. Technical validation, I wanted to make sure I could build it all. I also wanted to validate that there was a market out there of people who might buy it. And finally, customer validation, validating that there were people literally waiting to spend their money on a product like this. So for technical validation, I had a massive advantage. I'm a serverless consultant. I've been building serverless apps for like over 6 years now. So I knew the architecture, I knew I could build APIs, Dynamo tables, all of that kind of good stuff could be done really easily. The test with ChatGPT, I knew I could build comments. And with some prompt engineering, I knew I could probably improve the formatting and the structure to make it a lot simpler. From previous projects, I also knew I could build Chrome extensions that added things to existing websites. And finally, if you've never deployed a serverless stack or full stack websites before, you don't have to have all of that to be your technical validation. You can actually use other tools. If you're more comfortable with just running an Express server, do that. If you aren't comfortable with development at all, there are really good no-code and low-code tools out there. Whatever it takes to get your idea into the real world and tested by users as quickly as possible. For market validation, I did some things relatively well. I knew that LinkedIn was growing, and with the shit show that is Twitter at the moment, I knew there was loads of people coming across to LinkedIn and looking to grow their account. Both of the posts I showed earlier are from LinkedIn ghostwriters, people who are being paid to write content on LinkedIn for other people. So there are people spending money to grow on LinkedIn. And finally, underneath both of these posts were loads of comments saying, oh, I'd love to do this commenting, but I don't have time. That is my perfect audience. Now, customer validation is where I should have done better. I didn't message any of those people that commented saying they don't have time. I could have messaged them, found out why they're wanting to grow on LinkedIn, finding out how much time they do have every day, or found out whether they are actually interested in spending money on a tool to help them grow. This is something I'm definitely going to do better in the future. I could have also talked with the copywriters, because I found working with the startups that I've done, they often design a product for business to consumer, but then find a really good market with either freelancers or with agencies where they use the tool for their clients, and business-to-business relationships are often very profitable. But with more validation than I normally do, I moved on to the first coding montage. So I spent a first few days focusing on the MVP, which for me is always going to be the minimum valuable product. Focusing on building something that will actually provide value to your user, because if it's just a viable product and it doesn't provide value, why would they pay for it? For me, that was a Chrome extension that added this little LinkedIn Power Tools button to any comment box on LinkedIn. You click that, it scans the text, and it generates a comment, all using AI. So this whole thing took about 2 days to build, and honestly, most of the time was getting the Chrome extension working. So one thing I did add to this is I didn't want people to be able to generate, say, 20 comments in a minute and spam a load of content. So I've actually added an artificial typing time to every single word on the sentence, so the user has to watch it be typed out, so they're more likely to kind of modify it, as the comments that are generated I treat more like drafts than finished comments. So with that ready, this is actually the architecture for my very first version. It's far simpler than most people expect, with just a Chrome extension, linking to API gateway, and a single Lambda function. This just shows that you really don't need a massively complicated architecture to build a very, very powerful solution. And because this wasn't public, I didn't even have any authentication on the APIs. So, before going any further, I accidentally did something that turned out to be incredibly useful later on. I recorded a demo of my tool generating a comment on someone's post and shared that video on LinkedIn. That video then went on to get, I think, 17,000 views and 52 comments. Some people loved it, said how interesting it was and how useful it could be. On the flip side, I did get comments like this, where they hated it. I honestly can't remember the last time I was told I needed to repent. So, to capitalize on this notoriety, I used a landing page builder, built a little form, and started collecting wait list users. I continued to post about the LinkedIn tool as I developed things such as authentication and sign up. And by the time my beta was ready to launch, I had 25 people who were ready to test out the product. And this is my beta architecture. So the main changes are, we added Cognito for authentication and authorization, which API Gateway works perfectly with, but there was a bit of faff trying to get it integrated into a Chrome extension. Because you're not allowed to use any libraries inside a Chrome extension, I had to do some custom API work, but that wasn't too difficult. I also added a couple more Lambda functions for doing things like checking how many comments a user has remaining that day, as well as the sign up. And finally, a set of Dynamo tables for the users that were available, as well as for the usage that users had. With everything ready, I moved on. I sent out an email to all of my audience, all 25 of them, and told them that they could sign up for the Chrome extension and test it out. As soon as I did that, within the first couple of hours, I was getting really useful feedback. Some of the feedback I'll talk about later, but this is kind of why I was trying to use the minimum valuable product, because I can get that feedback. I can find out what people want, what people don't want, and how to grow this product. So at this stage, I had 2 tasks. Handle the feedback, whether that was fixing bugs, because of course there's always bugs, adding features that I thought were necessary for the version 1, adding a backlog of features that I thought would be great in the future, but not in the first 30 days, because that's not a critical feature. And finally, I did get a lot of requests, which were like, can I have a button that comments on every single post in my feed? And I said no, that's not the kind of product I want to build. Finally, getting ready for V1 involved building a website, landing page, sign up, integrating sales, and all of that. I almost decided to try and build the website myself, and then realized I've only got 30 days. So I cheated. I bought a stock React template, and I decided to just customize the CSS and the content, and ended up with this. It's definitely not going to win any awards for design, but when you've got 30 days, getting 80% of the way there in 20% of the time is a trade-off I'm definitely willing to make. For payments, I went with Stripe, because handling card details is something you never want to do, never mind in a 30-day project. So I did have to use some Stripe subscriptions, which added some webhooks. But setting up the webhooks and the Lambda functions took a couple of minutes using Serverless. But getting all the business logic for what to do on each of the different sign-up, like user defaulted on payment kind of events, that took a couple of days. If you've never done a Stripe integration before, I recommend, if you are going with Stripe, start with just a one-off payment. So have a single product, pay for it once, and it's a much better learning experience. But if you don't want to do all that, there's a lot of low-code and no-code tool builders out there that have payment options, including Stripe and loads of others, built in, so you never have to touch any of it. So here is my final architecture. It's on the left, we've got the commenting feature, which is basically the same as before. There's a Chrome extension where they can sign up using Cognito. That adds a button, calls API gateway, a Lambda function takes that message, customizes a prompt, uses ChatGPT, and then just increments the user's usage record in Dynamo. The Stripe setup, when they choose a plan, it creates a checkout page. I don't handle any of the card details, but I just get messages to my webhook when they sign up, when they register, if they change plan. All of that goes through a set of Lambdas and then changes the record in Dynamo, which controls how many comments each user has each day. So it was launch day. It was 17 days after I started this product. And I was ready to launch. Over the last 2 weeks, I'd continued to post updates and posts on LinkedIn, and I now had about 70 people on the wait list. I sent out the launch email and just waited. Over the next few days, I continued to work on the app, trying to fix some bugs or adding a new feature. One of the features that actually came from the very first set of beta testers was, that's missing a page. Was adding the ability to add a quote or a message to a comment. I found that the default comments were all right, but they didn't drive engagement. So what I did is I added the ability to add a drop-down, and you can say, I want to add a question or a quote or a resource link to the comment. This meant that I was now talking with people who are in the Forbes 30 under 30, which is something that I would never have expected to be able to do. And it increased engagement, which means their followers are more likely to connect with you. So by the end of the 30-day challenge, I had a tool that was continuing to gain free users and paying users, hitting a total of 6 paying users, 300 free users, $140 in revenue, and $137 in profits, which is pretty nice. When you think the tool had only actually been live for 13 days, then that's actually pretty good. At the start, I said there were 2 things that helped make this challenge pretty successful for me. So the first is my unfair advantages. I'm a serverless developer. All of the technical side of things were relatively simple for me. I didn't have to validate very much, and I was able to very quickly iterate and build out the solution. If you're not a serverless developer, there are loads of free tools out there, call it low-code and no-code tools, that allow you to have pretty much the same speed. Also, I have had 14,000 followers on LinkedIn. Because I was building a tool that helps you grow on LinkedIn, every time I posted a message, I was talking to my ideal customers. So that really helped. But one thing that I found was an issue and a challenge I couldn't overcome in this 30-day challenge was marketing. Starting with 14,000 followers was a great way to get initial traction and the first customers. But I knew that if I posted every day for 6 months, the users would continue to increase, but eventually just plateau. If I wanted to actually grow this into something that I could live off, I needed to try something different, some different marketing, whether it's SEO, ads, influencer marketing, or affiliates. But when you're trying to build a product in 30 days, trying to come up with the idea, validate it, build it, launch it, and do marketing was a bit too much for me. Some of these things, like SEO, they can take months. So that's something I never really invested into. So what would I do differently if I did this again? I want to start by saying I have tried this challenge again 2 more times since. Both of those times, I tried to validate the idea, and they just didn't have a market. So I never actually developed them. Normally, I would have spent 6 months building out those products to get to exactly the same point where I realized they weren't worth it. In the future, I'm going to continue to do more of these challenges until I have maybe 1 or 2 more products that are bringing in a small amount of income every month. At that point, I really want to try a marketing month. Spend 30 days trying to find a way that is scalable to grow these products that I can then use to grow future SaaS ideas. Another thing I definitely want to do a lot better is the customer validation, talking with the people who are going to be buying my product. And finally, I want to try more B2B. I think B2B is a market that is a lot more forgiving in terms of being able to grow a product and have a higher price. When you're selling a product for $30 a month, you need a lot of customers before you can actually live off that income. So it's now 18 months later. This was the start of last year. And for the first 6 months, I basically did nothing. I did the occasional support question, maybe a refund or some bug fixes, but that was it. After about 8 months, I got a trademark infringement letter from LinkedIn because I'd called my tool LinkedIn Power Tools. That was a rather stupid idea, but it meant that my Chrome extension got removed from the Chrome store and it went silent. All in all, my product had brought in about $2,000 in profits in those 8 months. Not an amazing result, but a really, really good step. The purpose of trying lots of these smaller tests is not that the first one you do is going to make you $1 million. It's the fact that you might find one eventually that makes $2,000 a month. And that's something you can then live off and start to build out a portfolio of lots of small products. Another thing is I've gained all of the code. I now have a serverless repo which contains all of the Stripe integration mechanisms and logic for a payment provider, which will make future projects even easier. So I've also decided to rebrand it. So recently, I took the whole project, renamed it to Social Growth AI, which isn't trademarked, I checked, and I also decided to try something different. I actually converted all of the code from the serverless framework to the CDK. But that's for a different talk, although Matt's talk earlier about using Q might have come in a lot easier than the way I did it. So if you want to try it out at some point, yeah, just search for Social Growth AI in the Chrome store. Now, what can you learn if you want to try this kind of thing yourselves? First is find your unfair advantage. You might say you don't use LinkedIn, but are you prolific on Reddit or Twitter? Use those kind of platforms to try and get feedback even before you've started building the product. Have you got experience in a specific industry? Maybe look into ideas in that industry. You'll know the language, you'll know the kind of words, you'll have ideas of where really good pain points might be. You'll probably even know some people you can ask about, and they could even become your first customers. Second is to start with a problem, not a solution. There's a lot of really cool tech out there, and as engineers, we love to go, I want to build something with this tech. And then you try and find a problem to fit that solution to. And that way round, you're not starting with a problem, so therefore you're rooted in the wrong dimension. And that's what I've always done before, whereas, as you've seen in this slides, the solution I ended up with is incredibly simple. It's an API gateway, a couple of Lambdas, Cognito, and a few Dynamo tables. It's something that anyone in this room would be able to build. Finally, focus on the minimum valuable product. I've talked about this quite a few times already in this talk, but I think it's really important. Cut out anything that is not providing explicit value to your users. If you have an idea, add it to the backlog. If your product continues to grow, you can add it later, but for now, it is not important. Now, this accounts for the technology you're using as well. You don't need to spin up like a Kubernetes system to be able to run a simple API. And this is one of the reasons I love serverless. It's small, it's portable, and it allows you to have full control over your code. If you don't like serverless, for some weird reason, or if you just haven't got experience developing it, pick a tool that allows you to test your idea as quickly as possible. So that's my talk. I really hope you've enjoyed it, and you've seen how focusing on a problem to solve rather than a technology can help you achieve a profitable business as quickly as possible. And in 30 days, you could have a life-changing result. If you want to learn about serverless, I have a YouTube channel where I've been creating videos for, I think, 6 years now. And we basically help you become a better serverless developer. And if you want, you can check out the extension at socialgrowth.ai. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, Sam Complete Coding, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. It was a really nice presentation. Thank you for that. And do we have any question for him? Soru var mı? Sorusu olan?
That's easy.
There's not. Thank you.
Thanks.
Really-
Ah, yeah.